I won $60 million on Monday morning, and my first reaction wasn't joy. I didn't scream, I didn't shake, I didn't cry like people do in those lottery videos. I just stared at the confirmation slip in my hand and felt a strange quiet run through me, like someone had pressed a cold sheet of glass against my chest. 30 minutes later, I drove to my husband's office. My daughter, Elsie, sat in the back seat. She had no idea what was going on, just hugged her stuffed bear and asked if Daddy was busy. I told her no. I wasn't sure that was true, but I needed to believe it. I parked at the building where Aaron worked, a big distribution company worn down from running nonstop morning to night. I picked Elsie up, walked her through the lobby, then down the hallway toward the meeting rooms. Every step made a soft sound, but to my ears, it felt like knocking on a door somewhere deeper. I stopped in front of the frosted glass door. My hand hadn't even reached the handle when I heard his voice. Not loud, not yelling, but firm. "Don't drag my wife into this. She has nothing to do with any of this filth." I froze. My heart didn't race, and it didn't slow down. It just paused for a few seconds. I heard a chair scrape against the floor inside, then someone trying to argue back. But Aaron's voice cut through, cold enough that I stepped back half a step. I looked down at Elsie. She was playing with the string on her blue dress, not paying attention. She looked up and asked, "Is Daddy talking, Mom?" I nodded. I stood there a few more seconds, then took one step away, then came back. Something in his words kept me from walking in, not because I was scared, but because they stopped me in a way I didn't expect. To understand why that sentence held me in place like something was pulling me back, I have to go back 6 months. It started on a late autumn afternoon. My name is Talia Ward. I teach first grade at a small public school. I like kids, the smell of new paper, the calm of early mornings before the bell rings. I used to think I was the gentle type, patient, able to keep everything steady without ever raising my voice. But marriage isn't a classroom. There's no rule chart on the wall, no bell to end a tense moment. Just two people trying to understand each other, and sometimes not trying hard enough to keep the rhythm. My husband, Aaron Ward, had worked in operations at this distribution company for almost 10 years. The job wasn't new. It wasn't impressive. Just numbers, reports, endless shifts. He didn't talk much, and he often brought that busy look home with him. Some nights he'd walk through the door, sigh, and take off his jacket like it weighed more than usual. At first, I understood. Then I tried to understand a little more, but understanding that drags on too long turns into running out of breath, and I started running out. Elsie is a bright kid, 7, curious, always asking why her dad comes home late. I didn't have an answer, partly because I didn't know, partly because I was scared I'd say something she didn't deserve to hear. I remember one Friday night. He came home at 10. I was grading papers when I heard the soft click of the lock. I asked one simple question. "Did you eat?" He said, "Not hungry." Nothing else. No explanation. Not even a look that lasted more than a couple seconds. I wasn't angry, but something inside me went quiet. Quiet like a lake when the wind suddenly stops. Then came the day he forgot Elsie's first performance. She stood backstage, watching every other kid get filmed and clapped for by their parents. When she looked at me, I tried to smile. But after the show ended, she whispered, "Did Daddy see me, Mom?" I just held her. When I looked up, her eyes carried a kind of disappointment kids rarely show. That night, Aaron came home late as usual. She was already asleep. I said only one thing. "She performed today." He closed his eyes, let out a breath. "I forgot. I'm sorry," he said. But the apology felt like a soft knock on a door. Not enough to open it. After that, I stopped expecting. Stopped counting the hours until he came home. Stopped asking if he was tired. Stopped trying to find him in the little gaps he left behind. 6 months. half a year, long enough to teach yourself silence. And just when everything inside me was almost cold, that lottery ticket sliced through the quiet like a small blade. $60 million. Enough for me to stand on my own if I needed to. Enough that I wouldn't have to ask anyone for anything. Enough for me to walk into this building this morning with one clear thought. I need to know who the man I'm about to leave really is. But I didn't expect the first thing I heard from him to be, "Don't drag my wife into this." I stared at the frosted glass door, looked at my hand on the handle, and I realized some truths show up when you're the least prepared, even when you've just won $60 million. But in that moment, I only knew one thing. That voice, cold, sharp, protective, held me still like someone had just said my name in a crowded room. I stood there a long time, but in the end, I didn't open the door. Not because I was afraid to walk in, but because I knew that to understand Aaron's words, I had to face everything that led me here, to the moment I won $60 million and felt empty. And it started with days that didn't seem like much on their own, but slowly wore a marriage down. He came home late, at first, twice a week, then 3 times. Then it became habit. I used to wait to eat with him, but waiting turned pointless, so I stopped. Dinner got cold, the same way something between us cooled right along with it. When he got home, he always looked at his phone first, not for fun. I know the look of someone still working. His eyes were heavy, dark circles showing, but he didn't explain, and I didn't ask. He'd set his phone on the table and sometimes close his eyes for a few seconds, like he was gathering whatever strength he had left just to get through another day. Then there were the small things, like Elsie's permission slip. I put it on the dining table, right where he sat. The next morning he left for work without signing it. That night, still not signed. I reminded him gently, "It's for Elsie." He said, "I'll sign it tonight." But he fell asleep on the couch, and the next morning he left earlier than I did. I signed it myself. I told the school he'd seen it. I hated that feeling, covering for him in things that were supposed to be shared. But the deepest cut was our 10-year anniversary. I booked a table at a small restaurant. Not expensive, just the place we went when we first started dating. I texted him a reminder that afternoon. 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7, no reply. At 7:45, while I was trying to untie Elsie's hair ribbon in the bathroom, my phone lit up. Something urgent came up. 3 words, no apology, no promise, no saying when he'd be home. I stared at the message, then locked the screen. I sat on the edge of the tub, listening to the soft sound of running water. Some moments don't need to be loud to tell you someone isn't walking with you anymore. All of those things could be explained. I knew that. His job was exhausting. His shifts were unpredictable. Adults have days where they can't even catch their breath. But when those things repeat too many times, they stop being reasons. They become neglect, at least toward me. And when the feeling of being left behind lasts long enough, you start staying on guard. I asked him less. When he came home late, I just said, "Okay." When he forgot something, I did it myself. I carried everything on my own. Silence was the easiest choice. Silence became habit. Then a wall. And I stood behind that wall more than I want to admit. I stopped expecting anything. The love didn't disappear at once, but it thinned out like paper left in the sun too long. Sometimes I'd watch him come home, shirt wrinkled, shoulders heavy, but I didn't feel that pull toward him anymore. I started thinking maybe my daughter and I deserved something different. Not necessarily someone new, just a life without waiting, guessing, reminding, or being disappointed. I tried talking once, just one small sentence, quiet enough to barely make a ripple. "You can't keep going like this." He didn't look at me. His eyes stayed on the stack of papers in front of him. He said, "I don't have a choice." That sentence stuck with me, not because it was cruel, but because it was empty. Like he'd accepted that this was his life, stuck, stretched thin, dragging forward. A life where Elsie and I were just extras in the background. The real crack appeared when I happened to see his pay stub. A big deduction, no clear note. He didn't say anything. I asked. He only said, "Work stuff," then stopped. No more, no less, no explanation. I started thinking about the worst possibilities. Debt. Someone pressuring him. Something he was hiding. The hiding scared me more than the silence. And for the first time in our marriage, the thought of divorce showed up. Not as a threat, but as a real possibility. I didn't say it out loud, but I started planning. I saved money. Not much, but enough to know I wasn't trapped. And every time I bought a lottery ticket at the little market near my school, just one, I didn't expect to win. I treated it like a tiny reminder that there's always some chance to change your life, even if it only cost $2. Then it happened. I hit the jackpot. I saw the numbers appear on the lottery website and knew instantly that everything in my life could shift. All I had to do was decide, not in anger, not in a storm, but with clarity. By looking straight at the truth of this marriage, I could tell him, I could scream, I could leave. But I chose the coldest option I had, seeing with my own eyes what his life looked like when I wasn't in it. So I brought my daughter to his office first. No warning, no text, no chance for him to prepare an answer. I wanted to know who the man I'd been thinking about leaving really was. And when I stood in front of that glass door earlier, when I heard what he said, I knew I was about to hit the truth, whatever it was. I stayed there for a few seconds after Aaron's voice came through, not because I was confused, but because that sentence bumped into the belief I'd been building for months. A belief I thought was solid, that he wasn't on my side anymore. But the voice I heard wasn't the voice of someone indifferent. It was sharp, but not out of control. The kind of sharpness someone uses when they're trying to hold a line. Someone pushing back against another person, not lashing out blindly. I tilted my head, listening more closely. No, I'm not signing this, and I'm not letting my wife take the fall for your mistake. I saw the shadow of his department head, Mallory, turn his chair around, silver hair combed neatly, leaning back with the kind of confidence that comes from being used to giving orders. I couldn't see his face clearly through the glass, but his voice carried enough for me to catch every word. Aaron, cooperate a little. We need someone to take responsibility, and she's the best fit. She doesn't work for the company. No one will trace it back to her. I stopped breathing for a moment. The she in that sentence was me. I tried to keep my breath steady, not angry, not panicked, just colder. Mallory went on, his voice smooth but calculating. Just sign it. This is the cleanest option. I didn't know what project they were talking about. All I knew was that a few months ago, Aaron asked me for some educational materials for a partnership between his company and a local school. I emailed the files. That was it. I wasn't part of anything. No signatures, no meetings, just a teacher helping her husband with a small work task. And now they wanted to use my name to wipe someone's mistake clean. Aaron answered, his voice dropping low, each word hitting like a tap on the table. The mistake is yours. You messed up the inventory numbers, and now you want me to sign off for you. He paused. Don't drag my wife into this just because she can't fight back. That sentence, the one I'd heard earlier, now sat in its full context. And it was heavier than I thought. Mallory let out a laugh, the kind of confident laugh that borders on arrogant. You're making this harder than it needs to be. You know better than anyone that if you don't sign, upper management will put the blame directly on you. Aaron didn't back down. I'll take responsibility for what's mine, but this part isn't mine, and it sure as hell isn't hers. I squeezed Elsie's hand tighter. She looked up. Mom, what's wrong? I'll explain in a minute, I whispered. I didn't want softness to slip in. Not here. I needed to see everything clearly. And the truth was unfolding 1 minute at a time. I stepped back half a step, letting my back rest lightly against the wall. I started piecing together things I'd spent months only feeling instead of seeing clearly. The late nights, the sighs, the moments when I asked and he gave no answer, the way he looked at his phone with that weight in his eyes. I thought it was indifference, but now, hearing the way he spoke, I realized he'd been put in the line of fire, and I hadn't seen it. I heard paper shoved hard across the table. Aaron spoke, clear and cold. I'm not signing to cover for you anymore. I've already had my pay docked for the other times you told me to take the hit for the department's mistakes. I didn't say anything, but now you want to drag my wife into this. So, no. I tilted my head slightly. I knew he'd had a pay deduction. I'd seen it on the stub, but I didn't know why. I thought he was hiding debt, hiding mistakes, hiding something dark. But the truth was he hid it so I wouldn't worry. He had been taking the blame for someone else. And he kept quiet and carried it alone. I realized I'd been wrong in the most important way. I thought he chose work over family. But the truth looked more like this. He was being forced into choices, pushed, cornered. Someone like him, quiet, responsible, is easy to use. I know men like Mallory. I see their kind all the time in schools, too. People with authority who push the dirty work onto the ones least likely to fight back. And I remembered what he once said. I don't have a choice. Turns out that wasn't about me. It was about the system. Mallory stood up, his chair scraping loudly. You should rethink this. This will go badly for you. Aaron answered without shaking. I've already thought about it. This part is yours. There was a short silence, a silence long enough for me to make a decision. I put my hand on the door handle, but before opening it, I looked down at Elsie. Stay right next to me, okay? She nodded, suddenly serious. I opened the meeting room door, not hard, not dramatic, just enough for everyone inside to turn and look. Aaron turned, and when his eyes met mine, there was no panic, no avoidance, just surprise and something that looked like relief. Mallory looked at me with irritation. And you are? I cut him off, my voice calm but not soft. I've heard enough. The room went silent. I took one more step in, my eyes fixed on Mallory. If you need someone to take responsibility for your mistake, look in the right place. Not me, and not my husband. The words hit the room like metal on stone. No shouting, no threat. Just the truth, clean and sharp. Mallory opened his mouth to say something, but I'd already turned to Aaron. We're leaving. Not an apology, not blame, just the line that closed the whole dirty scene they were trying to set up. Aaron stood right away. No questions, no explanations. He rested his hand lightly on Elsie's shoulder, as if to make sure she was still with him. And as we walked out of that meeting room, I realized something. All this time, it wasn't that he'd stepped away from the family. He'd been standing in front of us, taking the hit in a way I never saw. We left the room in silence. No one spoke, but every step felt like it pushed through the thick air between the three of us. Elsie grabbed Aaron's hand the moment we stepped into the hallway. Her little fingers wrapped around his like if she let go for even a second, something bad might pull him back into that room. I looked down and saw his hand trembling, very slight but unmistakable. I had never seen him shake. Aaron always held himself steady, even on his most exhausted days. But now, after standing up to his boss, he looked like someone who just walked out of a battle he no longer had the strength to hide from. Not because he was weak, but because he'd been standing in a place no one cared how tired he'd become. When the building door closed behind us, it felt like the noise inside got sealed off too. A breeze brushed past my shoulder, cool and light. I didn't feel lighter, but I felt clearer. Aaron opened the car door for Elsie first. She climbed in, hugging her stuffed bear to her chest. He walked around to the driver's side. I sat beside him. The door shut with a sharp click, like the start of a conversation we both knew we couldn't avoid anymore. He placed both hands on the wheel. He didn't start the engine. He didn't look at me. His jaw was tight, the bridge of his nose trembling just a bit. But when he finally spoke, his voice was strangely steady. "Talia, I'm sorry you had to hear it that way." I didn't answer right away. I wanted to pick the right words. Not long, not soft, not blaming. I asked one very short question. "How long?" He knew exactly what I meant. "Almost a year." I stared straight ahead. "And you didn't tell me because you thought I'd worry?" He nodded. A small nod, but firm. "Not just worry. I was afraid you'd be disappointed." I went quiet for a few seconds. All I could hear was my own breathing. "You think I'm disappointed because you're struggling," I said. "But what disappointed me was not knowing where you were in all of this." Aaron turned slightly, though he still didn't look at me. "I know. You know, and you still hid it? I didn't want to drag you into the mess." His voice was low, not defensive, just stating the truth. I looked over at him out of the corner of my eye. His face was tired in a way I'd never seen before. Not the kind of tired that comes from work, but the kind that comes from fighting something bigger than you, and doing it alone. I asked my second question, "And the inventory mess?" He answered right away, without dodging anything. "They messed up. They forced me to sign 3 times. I took the hit twice. The third time, they wanted to use your name to wash the mistake. I wouldn't allow it." I let out a short breath. Not a sigh, more like something unclogging in my chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked again, this time quieter. He turned toward me. For the first time since we'd left that meeting room, his eyes met mine. "Talia, you were already exhausted. I didn't want to add more weight to you." That didn't make me soften. It made me clear. "I put you in the role of someone who didn't care," I said, still steady. "Not because you did anything wrong, but because I didn't have the full picture. I saw a small part and filled in the rest myself." He stayed quiet. His hands were still on the wheel, but his thumb pulled in slightly, a small sign of someone listening in the most serious way. "I never asked the right questions," I went on. "I just guessed, and when you guess wrong long enough, you start believing the story you made up." "Talia," he said my name softly, not pleading, not trying to fix it, not chasing after me, just a man facing a truth that was hard to swallow. "And," I added, "I've been cold to you longer than I meant to." He blinked. "Once? Just a reflex. No blaming me, no arguing, just taking it in." The car stayed quiet for a few seconds, and then I said the thing I knew I needed to say, not to forgive, not to end anything, but to clear a path for something honest to stand between us again. "If you want to protect this family, start with the truth. No shaking, no tears, no cracking. Just a clear sentence. Not a request, not a suggestion, a boundary." Aaron looked at me longer than before. His eyes weren't defensive, weren't avoiding anything. There was only one thing in them: acceptance. He nodded. Not loud, not dramatic, not a promise, not an attempt to patch things quickly, just owning what was his. And that, more than any promise, made this moment the most honest one we'd had in months. Elsie leaned forward and touched his shoulder. "Daddy, are you okay?" Her voice was small, but it broke the tension in the car just enough. He placed his hand over hers. I'm okay. I watched that moment, not to get emotional, but to acknowledge something. There were things I'd missed because I'd been standing behind my own wall for too long. Aaron started the car, but didn't pull out yet. He looked at the road ahead, then said a simple sentence. I'll tell the truth. All of it. I didn't answer with, I believe you. I didn't need to. Trust has to be rebuilt, not declared in a couple of words. I just nodded. Enough to show I was ready to listen, but not ready to forgive easily. And that's what makes this real. People don't change because of one loud meeting. They change when the truth is finally put on the table, clean and with no way out. Aaron looked at me one last time before pulling the car out of the lot. His eyes didn't beg. They didn't promise. They were just quiet, like someone who'd finally set down a weight he'd carried too long. And I knew that from this moment on, things between us might not get easier, but they would be clearer. Sometimes, that alone is the first real change. A week after that meeting, Aaron's office felt like it had been ripped out of its old state. I knew because he told me everything, piece by piece, without hiding anything anymore. The internal complaint was filed the very next morning. Over the next 3 days, the audit team went through every set of numbers Mallory had ever signed. By the 5th day, Aaron was officially cleared of all wrongdoing, and on the 6th day, Mallory was suspended pending investigation. When Aaron told me that, his voice wasn't happy, and it wasn't triumphant. It was the tone of someone who finally got his rightful place back without having to bow his head. I saw the change in him. Not a new kind of strength, but the kind he should have had all along, buried under too much pressure for too long. At the same time, I quietly did something of my own. I set up a savings fund for Elsie using part of the lottery winnings. A small amount, nothing flashy, but enough to give her a foundation when she grows up. I didn't tell anyone. I only told Aaron one night after she'd fallen asleep. He didn't ask what I planned to do with the rest of the money. He just nodded and said one simple thing. Thank you for thinking of her. No speeches, no arguments, no treating money like a way to divide power. Just seeing it as a way to protect the child we share. We started over in a way that didn't look like any reconciliation movie. No tearful hug. No promises of, from now on, I'll never again. No fancy date night to mark a new chapter. No grand declarations. We just started over with the truth. Every night, after putting Elsie to bed, we sat at the dining table. We didn't talk much. We just exchanged clear, simple sentences, enough to know where the other person stood. I asked more directly. He answered more clearly. Sometimes we sat in silence, but it wasn't the distant kind anymore. It felt like a safe pause, a space where neither of us had to pretend anything. The change showed up in the small things. Aaron came home earlier. Not every day, but whenever he could, he did. He stopped carrying everyone else's work on his shoulders. When something wasn't his responsibility, he handed it back to the right person. Some days he was still tired, but he told me ahead of time. I don't think I have the energy to play with her tonight, he said once, but I'll read her a story before bed. And he did. I asked more questions, not to interrogate him, just to understand. Simple things like, was anything hard today? Or, do you need me to help with Elsie tonight? The kinds of questions I once thought were pointless because tired people don't want to talk, but it turned out they opened doors I thought had closed forever. Elsie felt the difference too. She's not a psychologist, but she could see her parents weren't speaking in sighs anymore. One evening, she ran into the living room and asked, "Are you and Daddy not fighting anymore?" I looked at Aaron. He looked at me. We both smiled, not to cover anything up, but because we knew there had been a time when we really were too far from each other. One weekend night, when Elsie was sleeping over at a friend's house, Aaron and I sat on the porch. No wine, No music, just the sound of distant cars and the warm yellow light against the tiles. He sat quietly for a long moment, then said, his voice low but not heavy, "Talia, I know I'm not good at showing how I feel." I said, "I know." He turned toward me, "But I've always been on your side, even when you didn't see it." I didn't say "I know," because I'd only just learned that. Instead, I said something more important. Some people aren't good with words, but they stand with you when it matters. You only hear them when you're clear enough to listen. He nodded. A small gesture, but this time his hands didn't shake. I think that was the moment something lifted off him. And for me, it was the moment I understood that sometimes silence isn't a lack of love. It's someone carrying weight so you don't have to. When the night grew late, I stood up first. He stayed seated, looking out at the dark street. I turned back and said something that wasn't meant to close anything or to begin something new, just a reminder that we weren't going back to the starting line. We were stepping into something different. We'll keep going. But we won't pretend it's easy. He nodded again. And that was enough. I won $60 million. But the most valuable thing wasn't the money. It was the moment I stood outside that meeting room and heard the man I thought had grown the farthest from me say, "Don't drag my wife into this." One sentence didn't fix everything, but it opened a door I'd closed a long time ago. We're not perfect. We're not some model couple. But we're doing something a lot of adults forget to do. Stop, look at each other, and tell the truth. And if you're listening to this, I want to ask you something simple and real. Have you ever looked at your husband or your wife and thought they seemed cold on the outside, but deep down they were warm and kind and steadier than anyone else? If you have, tell me about it. Because sometimes the quiet ones are the ones standing strongest on our side. That's the end of the story. Thank you for being here with me.